When I was working on today's episode, I was tempted to start with something like, "This one's for the number nerds," or "This is dedicated to data dorks," because who doesn't love alliteration? But this impulse gave me pause. Analytics shouldn't be dismissed as a topic for geeks, although I wear my nerd badge with pride. Everyone should care about their business metrics. The jocks, the prom queens, business owners, and folks like you. Today, we discuss why data is important, what you need to know about analytics, and where to start. But first, a word from our sister station.
Welcome to another wet and wild set here on KMST, the word everyone hates to say, but everyone loves to listen to. K-Moist, the station that's jacked on tracks about water, steam, and everything in between. And now, weather on the ones.
It's a wet one out there today. No rain in the forecast, but it's humid, humid, humid. You know what they say? It's not the heat, it's the stupidity. But seriously, take a towel, make that a moist towelette, because this weather is going to dampen your spirits. And I'll kick it over to Kendra with sports.
Thank you, Kenneth. Last night's game between the Penguins and the Sharks made a major splash. The Sharks led the charge 4-3 at the end of the second period, but despite Deeks and rushes, the Penguins' plumber Jerry Wade turned the tide for an upset of 6-4, the Penguins. And now, headlines from Kindle.
Thanks, Kendra. From Georgia, 20-year-old Brooke Huckabee was elected mayor, making her the youngest female mayor in U.S. history. Global pop sensation Tyla makes history with Water, going double platinum, the fastest for any African vocalist to do so. And California Congresswoman Maxine Waters introduces new diversity and inclusion legislation. That's it for today's headlines.
Now let's keep things colorful with Purple Rain, Green River, and Black Water on KMST, where you'll find the moistest hits all day long.
Welcome to Almost Productive, a podcast mostly about marketing.
I'm Sean.
I'm Julie.
I'm Addie.
And I'm Ben.
And we are all marketing professionals at New Boston Creative Group in Manhattan, Kansas. So we've been doing something at New Boston, and I am totally not stealing from that initiative. It's just a completely referential inspiration. But I thought we could do some quick superlatives, just toss around some best and worst for you guys. So coming off the heels of the word from our sister station, hit me up with your worst word.
Oh, worst word.
Give me worst word as in like the
No
word
context.
No context.
No.
Just what's the worst
What do you
word?
think is the worst word?
I'll give you a recent one that is getting to me, which is Wendy's is running a commercial for their new saucy nugs, and I'm not about nugs. I don't like nugs. They're nuggets. No, I'm gonna say no to nugs.
What about nuggies?
Nuggies? Yeah, I'll go nuggies.
I didn't expect that.
Yeah, but nugs I don't like.
I think that's fair.
Okay.
I think that's a good one.
Julie, what
All
about
right.
you?
Oh, well, I wasn't expecting to answer these. I'm the question asker.
Okay.
Let's just keep rolling with these. Best dessert.
Warm chocolate chip cookie, a classic. Hopefully a scoop of vanilla bean ice cream on top.
I love a lemon bar. I think lemon bars are underrated.
Yeah, interesting. Worst style choice you ever made. This could be hair, clothes, what have you. Worst style choice.
Let's see. 5th grade. I'm trying to think what grade. So 5th or 6th grade. I rocked. There's a picture of me. I know I'm accepting some certificate. I have like a flat top. I had hair at that point. So I've got like a flat top of blonde hair and I can't remember what some polo shirt at the time. Just think, 90s tween polo shirt. But the kicker is my shoes are like zebra striped. They're like black and white zebra striped. They're real pronounced. I don't know. I thought they were cool, I guess. But that was quite the ensemble.
Wow.
Could we see this picture?
I will try to find it. It does exist somewhere. it's probably in a photo album. I'll try to remember next time I'm at my parents to find that.
Please do.
Dear listeners, if we can track it down, we will add it to our show notes.
We will. I have 2 off the top of my head. One, like many kids growing up, I decided to give myself a haircut and terrible, terrible short bangs. I was probably in 2nd grade when I did this. The second one is, I also think 5th grade, Sean. So maybe that's just the time to make terribly bold fashion choices. It was kind of like a camo jean skirt that had orange tones in it, like orange and green hues, with jeans under the skirt. So I have no explanation for that. I think straight to jail, probably. But I am confessing to the crime. So hopefully that bodes well for the sentencing.
Yeah. I think like 35 to life with parole.
Yeah. I think there's some options.
There's
there.
parole for
Definitely,
sure.
Definitely.
35 is so brutal.
But only
I'm sorry
for
for
good
saying
behavior.
that. I haven't even said
think
mine
that's
You
yet.
went real hard with the 35.
All right. Best vacation that you've actually taken. So not a dream vacation, one you've done.
This is hard. It's hard to narrow it down. Can I pick 2? I can maybe pick 2.
No. Welcome to my world.
Julie, you
Sorry.
of all people should have some leniency here.
I know I should. Okay, you can give us 2.
I'll try to be fast. So 1, I'm going to say Japan. Japan was fantastic. I love sushi, seafood, ramen, all of those things. And it was just such an interesting culture. So yeah, Japan definitely is up there. And then I'm going to say Austria for the other one was like best hotel experience. Our room opened up onto this lake with some mountains and that was lovely. So 2 very different, but I'm going to have to, those are tied for first.
Yeah, this is a tough one. Just for the sake of it, I'll go with, was it just a year or so ago, the whole family went to Myrtle Beach. So my parents, my sister, their kid, my kids, everybody in one giant like Airbnb condo, and everybody just had a great time. And it was just really nice to have everybody be together, everybody be like in good spirits for the whole week, you know. It's one of those miracles, no arguments, no tempers, like it just all worked really well. And we were right on the beach there, so we went to the beach every day and it was just great.
I've been to Chicago like a handful of times throughout my life just for different things. But like my favorite trip has been the one that I got to go last year with my fiance, Adri, because we got to, it was just us 2. I wasn't there for an improv thing. So we only could do improv stuff. I wasn't stuck with my family growing up, dragging us places we didn't want to go. Great museums, amazing aquarium, all the food that you could want. That's relatively affordable since we're still kind of in the Midwest when it comes to Chicago. So I loved that. So many good food options. So that was a really, really fun trip last year.
All right. Last one. Best advice for being happy. What you got?
Surround yourself with people who make you feel comfortable being yourself and that you feel happy to do the same for them.
Oh, I love that.
Thanks.
Oh man, yeah, this is hard. The first thing that popped into my head was maybe more work related actually, but don't take things personally. Nothing. Very seldom are things aimed at you. So do not internalize things that do not need to be internalized.
Yeah, I'll piggyback on that one. A thing that I like to remember is everybody else is living their own lives, and what they are doing is not because of you or towards you. So, you know, someone's driving slow in their car. They're not trying to mess you up. They're having their own life and day and doing whatever they have to deal with. And just know, you know, yeah, that whatever they've got going on is probably awful. And that's why they're doing whatever they're doing. And leave them alone. Worry about yourself.
Nice. All right. Well, let's dig into today's topic of analytics. And before we start asking more questions, because I guess that's what I'm doing today, I just wanted to tee this up with, so
recently I did a search for the worst hurricane, and the top results in Google had different lists, but none of them matched. And I was like, oh, that's weird. And as I clicked into each one, they all had different criteria. They had the deadliest, the most expensive in terms of damage. They had the largest in terms of geographic size. So I thought, hey, this reminds me of the episode we're about to do. And I was like, what they did was they defined what the worst was, and then they used data to make that determination. And really, isn't that analytics in a nutshell? So let's talk about it. Let's talk about what data means with marketing and why it's important.
Yeah, I think it's geographic area.
Oh,
Right? That's the definition of the worst hurricane, right?
yeah.
Don't you think? Are we all agreed on that?
I think we can agree that it's very subjective, like a lot of other queries and results.
It's an interesting take.
I was going to say, it kind of feels like it depends on what you're trying to figure out. Like, what are we using this data for? So in the case of the hurricane, is it like, oh, we want to prepare for damage in the future, so we're studying the worst damage hurricanes and then trying to learn more about them? If that's the goal, then probably highest damage, not geographic. But if you want to know, like, where the next big geographic bad ones are going to happen, like, maybe that's the direction you
Interesting.
go.
So have a goal in mind first.
Yeah. Like,
Okay.
what do
Well,
you...
also an audience. So first
Yes.
one, that could be your insurance agents who
Right.
want to know about the damage. The second one, that could be your scientists. Like, is it NOAA or something?
Yeah.
NOAA.
You got to call up Noah and ask him what he wants to know.
Right.
Noah at Noah.
Just plan to cut that part out, Nick.
I liked it. But yeah, no, I feel like, yeah, you're what you want to know, and then like what audience are we directing it towards are going to impact the way that you frame that determination.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah. Agreed.
So then when it comes to marketing, what types of data do we look at? What types of questions do we answer with data?
That's a good question with many answers. So depending on the client, depending on the kind of business, and what kind of platforms they have online, kind of determines what we want to and what we can access in terms of analytics. So if we're hired by someone to maybe dig into their website, of course, we hope that they have GA4, Google Analytics 4 set up. And that can let us really dive into anything from demographic information, geographic information, return users to the website. And then it kind of becomes, well, what questions are you hoping to answer? And then devising a scheme to look into those things.
I know one of the things that has come up recently is like, how can I get more people to read my email newsletter is like been a question. And I don't know if that question alone can be answered by the data alone, but we can use that to brainstorm questions that the data can answer. Like, which ones are your audience opening? Like, which ones are the ones that people are the most interested in? We can learn something about their subject lines and like what is making them click as well, click through, and if there's articles or links within the email. So there are follow-up questions that I think the data can answer, but maybe not that initial question.
Yeah. And I think too, we've talked at goal, I recently had a client ask, what does success look like? And I was like, well, let's sit down and talk about this for 5 hours over a couple of beers. Like, there's a lot to unpack there. What are you trying to do? And if you're on multiple platforms, you might be using each platform to be a piece of your marketing puzzle. So your goal on social media is going to be different from your goal on email, which is going to be different from your goal in search ads, but hopefully they're all working together to contribute to your overarching goal. So I think all of those pieces work together, define your goal, know where to achieve that, and then know what you can look for on each of those platforms. Another piece when it comes to, well, what does success look like is, what have you been doing? And we have a very smart sounding word for that called benchmarking. And anyone want to talk to benchmarking, what that is, why it's useful?
I think in most cases, whenever you're trying to develop a new strategy moving forward, it is good to have a starting point that you use to compare it against. So if you are starting this new campaign where on your website you're trying to drive people to, purchase this product or drive them to a form, you want it to be able to compare, like, okay, now that we've done these new sets of actions, how does that compare to what used to happen on our website before we did this? And that way, whenever you're sort of changing that, you're always able to then compare it against the previous sort of set. Pretty much like in any sort of like scientific like study, you want to have sort of that standard, that base that you're comparing your actions against.
But when it comes to data, there's a ton of factors that are going to influence a competitor that won't influence your organization the same way. And so having the benchmark shows you, it's comparing you to you and not setting on a bunch of standards that apply to a different organization that don't apply to yours.
Yeah, great point.
Having that control group kind of lets you put numbers into perspective. So this is just using an anecdote to say exactly what the two of you just finished saying. But say you had 100 people fill out your form last month. Is that good or is that bad? Did 500 people fill it out in months before, or did one? So kind of having real tangible numbers to compare future numbers to is helpful.
Well done, you guys. You're smart. You're so smart. So we've talked a little bit about different platforms, matching them up with goals and with sort of a baseline performance. Let's talk about some of the data points that we look at and why we look at those particular data points.
It might be helpful to talk about this in terms of platform or area of the internet. So when it comes to websites, something that we talk about are sessions and visitors. So sessions is how many times someone visits a website or how many times a website is visited. And then visitors are individual people. So that can be a helpful thing to look at. We can also look at individual pages within a website. So which pages are more popular compared to others. We can look at things like engagement, number of people who are engaged when visiting the website, which that definition kind of varies, but basically means they've clicked onto multiple pages or have spent X amount of time on a certain page. And then again, using benchmark data to kind of figure out which pages are performing better or worse on your site, and then hopefully taking that information and optimizing the ones that aren't maybe performing as well.
Yeah, agreed. Let's stick on websites for a little while longer before we switch platforms, because Addie, I totally agree with that. And I would add a couple of layers. So sort of like we were talking about with benchmarking, is knowing sessions and visitors is great, but then knowing, for example, what is my year-over-year growth, you're looking at those two metrics within that lens of how were we doing before. And also with like that user behavior, what pages are they going to, how much time are they spending on them? There are some pages that you may have a specific, used to be conversion, now it's called key event, but where you want someone to take a particular action. And you can look at, if you tag that action correctly, you can look at, well, which pages are contributing to that action? And you can get really detailed to then analyze those specific pages, like your best and worst, in terms of that metric. But just like we talked about with different platforms, you may see, hey, this page is really terrible at converting, but it's great at engagement. So people like this page. How can we change this if we want it to convert? Or is it okay if that's not a conversion page? Maybe this is just like a, I'm like the Bob Ross of analytics right now. It's just a happy little page. Just put a little number in there. It's a great little tag. Happy little page.
Yeah, and I was just going to sort of reiterate what Julie was saying about that's where you're going to have to do some sort of manual evaluation on your pages and not just look at the numbers blindly, because Julie makes a good point where some pages are not meant to be conversion pages. They're not meant to have you spend a bunch of time on them because they are, intermediate pages that are transitioning to some other page or their form of navigation. There could be lots of different reasons where you're trying to funnel people to the end goal of the page that you want people to spend time on.
So a couple other things, geographic and demographic information. So if you are maybe a brick and mortar store who doesn't ship your goods and services, and a lot of website traffic is coming from outside your region, that might be something to look into. So demographic and geographic things. And then which kinds of devices people are using when they visit your website can be important to look at as well. So if 90% of people who come to your site are, for instance, on a phone, you really want to spend a lot of time making sure the mobile experience is fantastic.
Yeah, and to your point about geographic data, that can also be an indicator of spam, because we see a lot of spam coming to domestic websites from international locations. So you might see a huge uptick and think, wow, my website's going great. Everyone loves this. And then you look into the data and you've got 10,000 visitors from Poland and you go, huh? But I only have 1,000 visitors a month. Typically, benchmarking data. So you can uncover problems that way too. All right, Ben touched on some email metrics before. Let's just talk briefly about those.
Well, I think the obvious one is opens. Did they even open the email?
Yeah, open rate and click rate. So what percentage of people who received your email opened it, and what percentage of people who opened that email actually clicked on something to your website. And then, yeah, benchmarking is huge here because a lot of those percentages are typically pretty small, depending on your industry and your listserv. So maybe 5% click rate is fantastic for you. Maybe that's terrible. That's super business to business dependent.
Yeah. And Ben, you talked earlier about subject lines as an example. And a lot of tools let you very easily do A/B testing. I don't know if you're not familiar. A/B testing is you give it two options and you see which performs better. And so there are people who are even bigger nerds than we are who will test on things like free or sale or last chance and share insight on these are some key words that you can have to improve your open rate. And then you can look at data from each of the subject lines that you use and compare, does one perform statistically better than another? And you can do the same thing with the types of content, either by tagging it or just knowing the content well enough and having the time that you can dig into that of like, these people click on t-shirts for sale more than jeans for sale, so let's promote that. All right. How about, we haven't talked about social search or really kind of with both the organic and paid efforts. So let's talk a little bit about what we would look at on those platforms.
Some of that will depend on your goal, but let's say you're running an ad on Meta and your goal is just exposure. You want as many people as possible to see this ad promoting your new store that just opened. So you don't necessarily care if people click to visit your website. Your main goal is just getting the word out there that this new business has opened and it's really cool, all of that good stuff. So if that's the case and you're putting money behind that ad, then what you would probably look at would be reach. So how many individual people saw that ad? And then impressions, how many times was that ad shown on a screen? And again, benchmarking, some of those numbers the first time aren't necessarily going to mean a ton to you, but once you start really building up your paid presence, then you can kind of determine which ads are performing better than others. And is there any rhyme or reason for that? Is maybe ads showing people in an image are performing a lot better than just ads showing text on screen, some of those things. So organic, unpaid is a little bit easier, I think, probably to nail down. I think that reach and impressions are probably two of the most important on your unpaid efforts, and then engagement in those posts. So are people liking them? Are they engaging with your posts? Are they sharing it to their friends? Are they taking the time to comment? Some of those things are items to consider.
Can you define reach and impression for the audience?
Reach is the number of individual people who see something, and then impressions is the number of times that thing is shown on a screen. So impressions will always be higher than reach because it can account for people, the same people, seeing the same thing more than once.
And platforms like Meta will use that to calculate frequency. So basically the average, if one person sees an ad twice, that's a frequency of 2, if that's sustained across the ad. And that can be another metric. Like, Addie, you were, in your example, you wanted to talk about a brick and mortar store trying to build buzz. You want a greater word of mouth. You want to lift that awareness. You're not going to do that with a frequency of like 1.39. You're going to need a frequency of 5 or more. And then as marketers, we do the dance. Well, you don't want people to get sick of your ad and start hiding it and reporting it. So you can't go too frequent, don't go over 7 or whatever the outermost is. So all of those are metrics that you can get on that platform.
And worth noting that all of the platforms are different and they report different things or call things different things. So definitely be sure that what you're looking at is defined.
And for paid, I would also throw in things like click and spend, because what does it mean to get 1,000 impressions? Are you paying $1,000 or are you paying 10? And so looking at cost per cost per 1,000 impressions, cost per click. So the raw numbers may not tell you a ton. They may just be a reflection of you spent more money this month. So kind of digging into some of those percentages, I think, is valuable too.
I'm curious if we get questions about this, or if we specifically talk to clients about this, about things like getting likes on posts and whether or not that is valuable anymore.
That's a great question. Okay, so my answer would be yes, it is still valuable, because the more people who like a post, the more Facebook will show it. The more people who will, there's a ripple effect of gaining exposure. So I think from Meta's perspective, there's value in that. From your perspective as a brand, there's value because you see what is resonating with, with my customers, with my clients, with my potential user base. And as a marketer, there's value because I can research competitors and see what's more successful and then use their best practices to leverage for other clients.
I agree. And I would just add that it might not be financially valuable. Like, someone liking your post does not mean that they might purchase from you or use your service. But to Julie's point, it's valuable because it's intel.
Right. And I can also imagine that specific posts have more of a tendency to generate a like versus others, where your, post that says we have a sale today may not get a bunch of likes, but your post about celebrating, the Olympics might get a bunch of likes, but that's not really business related. But so you just have to realize maybe at the outset, one versus the other is going to be more inclined to do well in that way.
Totally.
I think that's where benchmarks come back in too, because like you could have like a post that goes super viral, but like that doesn't mean that every post from now on will have, hundreds of thousands of likes. You still have to look back at like, oh yeah, who are the consistent people? Like, what are the consistent numbers of people engaged with this, and keep that in mind. Yeah.
And to that point, Ben, just because you have this post go viral doesn't mean that your sales increased that day. So looking at both, like if you do have a spike in visibility on a social platform, that doesn't always translate to sales. So they're both valuable. They're just different goals.
All right. We've covered a lot of ground. We've laid a lot of info out for people. I want to bring it back to how do we make this useful? So you get all these numbers. What do you do with them? How do you interpret them? And how can people who are like, holy crap, that's a lot of numbers, start using them?
First, I think you have to make sure that everything is set up. So make sure that GA4 is set up on your website, whether you hire someone to do that or try to Google it and figure it out yourself. But make sure that numbers are coming in and that you see non-zeros on the screen.
Well, I think you all know me. I'm a big fan of a dashboard. So I would throw that in as a key tool in your analytics belt. Whatever that looks like for you, we favor Looker Studio. Looker Studio is sort of like connecting your numbers with PowerPoint. You can select different ways to visualize your data, different chart types, do all sorts of customization and laying out. And I find that very helpful.
And of course, we want this to be helpful for people and for you to have some tangible takeaways, but this is a lot. This is a lot of information, and it's also time consuming. Doing all of these things, looking at the benchmark data at every, whether that's every week or every month. So this can be, I'm going to do a sales plug. This can be a good thing to hire a marketing company for, because there's so much, there's infinite amounts of data out there. So trying to parse through all of that can be pretty tricky. And sometimes the professionals, we're here to help you.
Sean and I are still developing that list of all the marketers, but I do remember one just off the top of my head. New Boston Creative Group in Manhattan, Kansas. Have you heard of them?
Oh,
I hear good things.
Do they have a .com? Is it .net?
newbostoncreative.com.
Okay.
Easy.
Right.
Easy to
great.
remember.
Listeners, check that out. Be sure to check that out. That's really our goal with this podcast, is to just confuse the hell out of everyone so that they call us. So, well done.
Mission accomplished.
Well, I think it's time to wrap things up. So thanks everyone for joining us for another episode of Almost Productive. But before we head out, I have a couple of Molly jokes, all curated with data and digital marketing in mind. So enjoy. Why is the number 9 so sassy?
Why?
Because she can't even.
10.
No, it was 9, Sean.
Oh, 9.
All right. What do hippies and SEOs have in common?
Tell us.
A love for anything organic. All right, last up. What sound does a digital marketer's watch make?
TikTok.
Yeah, Addie! Woo!
Oh, so good. Thank you,
like
Molly.
That app. I get it.
7, I guess.
7.
So.
Wow. Yeah. 7. Me too.
I think it's better than the last one, but obviously the first one was the best.
Agreed.
We should just stop there, to be honest.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Almost Productive. Before we go, we'd like to give a shout out to our producers Nick and Molly, who work behind the scenes to make this podcast possible. If you'd like to learn more about what we do at New Boston Creative Group, you can reach out to us at newbostoncreative.com. You can also follow us on social media at New Boston Creative on Instagram and New Boston Creative Group on Facebook and LinkedIn. If you liked this episode, please like, follow, subscribe, leave a review, and share the podcast with your friends. And if you didn't like the show, feel free to recommend us to your enemies. Tune in next time for some more office shenanigans, thoughts on trending topics, and marketing-adjacent insights. Until next time, we hope you have a productive day.
Views.
2.
Visitors.
7,826.
Click-through rate.
2.4%.
Engagement time.
10 hours.
Cost per click.
$2 million.
Cost per 1,000 impressions.
$2.
Okay, that's all I got. All right.